Chapter 35. The Battle for New York. Baltimore inspired me for some reason. Every night I would just sit in the crib and write. TV didn't distract me because we didn't have cable in the house where I was staying, and with our bootleg antenna, we barely even got the regular channels, so I could easily zone out into my music. Sometimes I would write a couple of songs in one night, and often they were some of my best. Coming from Let Me Fly and X is Coming, I wrote like that. I just finished one, listened to the next beat, then wrote the next one. I sold my soul to the devil and the price was cheap. Hey yo, it's cold on this level because it's twice as deep. But you don't hear me. Ignorance is bliss and so on. Sometimes it's better to be taught dumb. Shall I go on? After Niggas Can't Touch Me Kid failed, Wah told me that we weren't trying to put any more singles out for a while. But I didn't care. There were so many thoughts and stories in my mind. The words just kept flowing. And I was still trying to battle as much as I could. Most of the MCs in Baltimore were corny, but there was one dude named Nardo who was nice. One night, I went head to head with him for almost 2 hours straight. See, back then, I used to write 10-minute songs, so if I needed to give a nigga a 48 bar rhyme or a 56, it was no problem. Nardo was an exception. But most MCs ran out of things to say after a half hour or so, especially if they were just freestyling. Once I got older, I never liked to make up something on the spot or say a rhyme off the top of my head. Everything I said, I wrote. If I didn't write it, I wouldn't say it. Even though freestyling was thought of as the true test of a great MC, I felt differently. To me, making something up as you went along was meaningless. It had no point because you put that rhyme in the air, it was gone. Even if it was the best thing you ever said in your life, you wouldn't remember it afterwards. And to me, that was a waste. I wanted my words to have permanence to them. I wanted listeners to know that I thought carefully about what I was saying. My words and phrases weren't something hot that I just came up with. When I did think of a rhyme in my head, like when I took my walks through Yonkers, I always put it on paper as soon as I got home. I'm glad I had enough ammunition for that Nardo battle. If I never lost a battle in New York, I wasn't trying to lose one out here. But my rhyme skills would be tested even more the night Darren called me from Yonkers. Over the years, D and Y had put down a few other MCs with Rough Riders. One group was made up of some kids who called themselves Harlem Knights. They were young and needed a lot of work before they were ready to go into the studio and make songs, but they knew how to battle, and Y and Darren loved to throw everybody into a rhyme fight. The night Darren called, he said that he needed me to come back to New York right away. Harlem Nights was going to battle a group called Original Flavor in a pool hall in the Bronx that night, and he thought they might need a little help. Original Flavor had a lead MC named Jay-Z. Jay was from Brooklyn. Him and his partner Damon Dash had started a company called Rockefeller, and like us, were hustling to get a record deal. I had peeped some of his verses on different mixtapes and knew that he had built a rep on the streets as one of the best rappers in New York. So when Darren told me he was up there talking shit, I knew I had to go. I jumped in the first hack I saw and asked the driver if he would take the 3 hour trip. You want to go where? To do what? Luckily, the driver was a young dude from the neighborhood and saw how we were all getting down on the hustle tip. He also knew that I was the rapper of the crew, so he got excited about being able to take me to a big battle. He said he would even wait to bring me back afterwards. The pool hall was on 145th Street in the South Bronx. When I walked in a few minutes after 1 a.m., the crowd was thick. Jay and I weren't really supposed to battle. Darren had wanted me there more like an insurance policy to make sure that Rockefeller didn't put their big gun in the mix. I think Jay's crew felt the same way about him because at the beginning, we were both chilling on the side. But when things started getting nasty and Harlem Nights and Original Flavor just started dissing each other, the crowd started eyeing the two of us. The people knew that we were the top dogs of our crew, and they wanted us to go at it. And after a few more rounds, I just couldn't stand to the side anymore. It was time to hold down the fam. I don't give a fuck. What? I looked over at Jay. Let's do it. Let's get it on, baby. We both climbed on top of the pool table, and Jay stood in front of me and started it off right away. He did his thing with his first verse, and the crowd started hollering like it was over. Then it was my turn. I wasn't going out like that. In fact, I wasn't going out at all. This is the darkest shit, sparkest shit, hitting with the hardest shit, because I've always started shit. The two of us went back and forth for almost an hour, aggressively spitting rhymes in each other's face. It's about time to start another robbing spree, because yo, my way is highway robbery. Everyone in the spot had surrounded us on the pool table. Folks were hooping and hollering at the end of every line. It was like the Bill Blast battle all over again. But this time, there was more at stake. This was a battle for New York, and my opponent was much stronger. I brought all my heat. You bad nigga? I'll be back to see if you still here. You know my style will put your fucking man in a wheelchair. He'll never walk again on the strength of me. That's how I left him, G, scared to death of me. I knew it was close. Jay had as many rhymes as I did. Told stories, talk shit, flip styles. I never liked my battles to be close because then you'd always get some clown to be like, fuck that, my man ate you. When it wasn't even like that. I liked there to be no fucking way for anybody to say anything. But that didn't happen this time. That's why I started worrying. Some people are gonna be thinking, maybe. Outside, after it was over, Damon Dash came over to Darren and me. It was snowing already early morning. Darren and him knew each other from the streets, who brothers were, how brothers got down. So despite the fierce competition that went down between Jay and me, there wasn't any beef. This was hip hop. We all shook hands. Then I heard some big words. Yo, your man did kind of get him, Damon said to Darren. What? What was that? I looked over to the two of them. Yo, your man did kind of get him. When I heard that, I knew my record was still intact. That was Jay's right hand man. Satisfied with my trip, I said peace to Darren, got back in the hack, and went right back to Baltimore. I didn't even go home. Chapter 36. Somebody's gonna die. Late one summer afternoon, I was walking back to the block with Boomer. I was walking in the street because I rarely walked on the sidewalk. There was more space, and I wouldn't have to worry about bumping elbows with any B-more clowns that didn't want to give me my 3 feet. Boomer had just finished eating his lunch and was jogging beside me off the chain. I didn't hear the van coming behind us. Bam! When I turned my head, I saw Boomer in the air. The van hit him smack in his chest. He flipped over a couple of times and then landed 10 feet in front of me. I knew right away. He was standing on his feet, but I could see it in his eyes. That van had killed my dog. For the first few moments, I couldn't even yell. I just stared at him. My boy's chest was split open and he was bleeding out of his nose. His legs were wobbling. He had no fight left. The impact had done more damage than he could bear. I watched Boomer take his last breaths. And when he fell, I lost my mind. What the fuck? I yelled as loud as I possibly could. Somebody's gonna die. I wanted to murder everybody in that van. Boomer was my motherfucking nigga, and now my boy was gone. I didn't want to hear nothing. That whole family deserved to die. I don't want to hear a fucking thing. If I had a burner on me, it would have happened. But when I looked up to find the bastards, I saw that they had never stopped driving. That's what really hurt. They knew what they did. They just didn't care. My dog was lying dead in the street, and that family was driving away like nothing happened. Like my dog was a fucking alley cat or something. I couldn't understand. There was plenty of room. They didn't beep or nothing. But that was my boy, Boomer. All I could do was cry. Chapter 37, Powerhouse. When I came back to Yonkers for good, Wah and Darren finished turning the upper half of this office building in downtown Yonkers into their own recording studio. The brothers understood that the first thing a production company needed to be successful was a place for its artists to write and record their music. Yonkers didn't have any full-fledged studios anywhere, so they couldn't rent someone else's spot like Jack had been doing in New Rochelle and Mount Vernon for all those years. And they also didn't want to pay studio costs. Their father, Mr. Dean, was a real estate broker, so they understood that the best way to do that was to be your own landlord. They called the spot Powerhouse, and in the mid 90s, that became Rough Riders' home. Every night of the week, anyone that Wah or Darren had put down with the double R was in Powerhouse working on their skills. Producers stayed until morning time playing music on the different keyboards and sample machines. Young and wannabe MCs sat on the couches with their notebooks in their laps writing rhymes. The lounge was always flooded with brothers from the neighborhood that were trying to get into the hip hop game in some way. And then there was always another bunch of random heads congregated outside arguing about what rapper was better than who. It didn't take long for Powerhouse to become the most active hip hop recording studio in Westchester. But almost from the day we rolled in there, the studio was defined more by the battles it hosted, and I loved every minute of it. When I creep through, niggas is see through, just like a negligee. And there ain't no talking because ain't much that dead can say. MCs travel from all over Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, Jersey to put their skills to the test. There would always be a banging beat playing in the studio room so it could go down as soon as a stranger showed up. But sometimes battle would just erupt in the lounge or the reception area. It didn't matter. Get the mayor on the horn. Time for shit to go down. Strap for the showdown. Wet up the crib, kick your door down. I know you scheming, so I got to get you first. But you put you right up in a brand new hearse. Could be worse. I never cared where an MC was from or how far he came. I just jumped all over them and made sure they left with the loss. Just like I had been doing on the street since I was 15. My style wasn't win by a little bit. It was beat the shit out of him. Finish him. And after he doesn't want to rhyme anymore, then hit him with two more verses just because he came up. Motherfucker, what made you think you could? I wasn't the only one representing Rough Riders in these battles, though. The younger MCs always gave me some help. Harlem Nights wasn't around much anymore, but these three Yonkers kids I had introduced to Wah, who called themselves the Warlocks, Jadakiss, Chic, and Styles, and their man Casino, were always there. As was rapper Murder Mace from Harlem, Drag On, this Newark MC called Loose, and even Nardo, the brother I had battled in Baltimore. So with all of them around, the idea, whenever a challenger showed up, was to first put the pups on them. And then they would go at it for a few rounds and represent double R. Then if it looked like the battle was stalling or I needed to get us a win, I'd step in and knock out whoever was left standing. The strategy made us a pretty dangerous home team. Sat Money down, told him how much his peeps missed him. Boom, one shot through his respiratory system. Kissed him good night, put him to bed with four more to the head. So I know he understood what I said. Red was all over the place and it didn't look good. So I did what a crook would, searched the crib and took goods. One night, I wasn't there. Some group from Queens came in and almost set it on us. Kiss did his best to hold it down, but he would always catch a nigga with the first two bars. But once I heard that the group got the better of him, I made sure that they were brought back to the studio as soon as possible. When they showed up the second time, I murdered those strangers one by one. I just stood in the middle of all three of them for 2 hours, flowing nonstop. When it was over, my jeans and my sweatshirt was soaked in sweat. It felt like I had lost 10 pounds, but our win-loss record was intact. As more and more MCs found their way to Powerhouse, more and more MCs left as losers. Rappers learned to be wary of showing up in YO without their best material because we would tell them everything they needed to know about their whack rhymes. It didn't take long to build a rep. And with each win, the word on the street kept getting louder and louder. While I was away, Irv Lorenzo had been making moves. Now he was Irv Gotti, a big time producer, and had got his Queens MC called Mike Geronimo a record deal with a small New York based label called TVT Records. He had also put together a group called the Cash Money Click that TVT was close to signing as well. So when Gotti invited me to do a verse on one of Mike Geronimo's singles, a track called Time to Build, that he also had a kid named Ja Rule on, a young nigga from the Cash Money Click, I jumped at the opportunity to flex on all these new artists that he was working with. Maybe my old friend needed to be reminded of how I got down. I'm peeling niggas' caps like oranges, hit them in the head with 2 by 4 inches. I'm a grimy nigga, so I like my bitches cruddy, my clothes dirty, dick shitty, and my knife bloody. It was a good verse, and I was going to be the last MC to spit on the song, but then Gotti did me dirty. A few days later, I laid my vocals. He told me that he decided to put Jay-Z on the track as well. There wasn't any beef between Jay and I. We hadn't seen each other or spoken to each other since the battle in the pool hall. But knowing that he would be on the song, I wanted to do my verse over. Come on, X. Don't do me like that, Gotti complained. We got to get the song out. But my instincts were right. See, when Jay went to the studio, he got upset when Gotti told him that I was going to close the record over him. So he listened to my verse and took some shots at me. So when I'm browsing through your housing projects, niggas get 5,000. Shit is rough. That was fucked up. If you were going to put him on the song, why didn't you put him on the song like you put me on the song? I yelled at Gotti. You let him hear my shit so he knew how to counteract what I said. That gave me a disadvantage. If I knew there was going to be a battle on wax, I would have finished him. But both of y'all are my niggas, and I don't know with how crazy you can get if I could safely put you two on the same room together, Gotti answered. That was a weak excuse. A few weeks later, Gotti made up for the move by taking my demo tape to TVT to see if he could get me signed there like he did with his other artists. But the president of the label didn't like my material. He claimed that I sounded too much like the group Onyx, who were known for rowdy anthems like Throw Your Guns and Slam. I knew that was some bullshit, but when Y had brought my material to Sean Puffy Combs, who had blown up with my YO girl, Mary J. Blige, and now had his own label, Bad Boy Entertainment, he had pretty much said the same thing. I wasn't marketable. I cursed too much, and the public wasn't ready to hear that kind of anger right now. I finally started to sense a pattern. I knew what these check writers really wanted to say. They wanted to say I wasn't a stable investment, that I was running the streets and in and out of jail. They wanted to say I was a problem, a risk. But that wouldn't have been the first time I heard that. Try School 18 or Andress or living with my mother in School Street. I just wish someone had the guts to come to a motherfucker real. Like, we know that what your struggles are, but we see your talent. Trust, that was all I wanted. I was reckless because I didn't give a fuck. I robbed niggas because I was starving and I was broke every fucking day. Couldn't anyone ever understand that? In 1994, the biggest label in the world was Death Row Records. Fueled by producer Dr. Dre and his G-Funk sound, the artist Snoop Doggy Dogg, Death Row had brought a West Coast gangsta aesthetic of chronic and gin and juice to the music and started selling millions of records in the process. On the wave of that success, the label CEO, Suge Knight, had thoughts of creating a Death Row East, a New York-based affiliate of his company that would expand his empire in an attempt to mirror the success he had with local artists in Compton and Long Beach with East Coast MCs. One night, on the word of Corrupt, one of his artists, Suge, came looking for me. It was the night Snoop had a show in Manhattan at Trafalgar Square. Suge brought Corrupt, Snoop, and some of his other Death Row artists up to Powerhouse to hear me rhyme. I had heard of these niggas. I knew that Snoop and the Dog Pound were the biggest rappers in the game at the time, but I didn't care. They were in my house, and I was going to do what I do. Y'all motherfuckers talking about it ain't nothing but a G thing. But nigga, I'm still living. So hollow tips must be the only thing I'm still giving. You fuck with me, there'll be a ribbon around your tree. How did your mother put it? Oh, yeah, in love and memory. Gotti was there that night, and by this time, he knew how to set me off. So to spark my fire and get me to spit my most aggressive rhymes, all he had to do was look at me and shrug like he knew I could do better. I like to laugh and first play it off like I'm cool with them, then wet them up like a fucking pool hit them, then the pit bull get them. Break y'all niggas down to nothing. That's what y'all faggots get for bluffing. Who's next? All eyes were on Snoop, Daz, and Corrupt. They were supposed to be the hottest niggas in the world, but they stayed seated. Wah and Darren stood next to me with this ugly, confident look on their faces, and we all just looked at Suge. He was standing in the back, smiling, loving every minute of it. A week later, Suge flew me, Wah, Darren, Gotti, and 6 other Rough Riders out to LA to talk business. It was my first time to the West Coast. Suge said that he never saw an MC who kept it as raw as I did, and he wanted to sign me as soon as possible. I would be a perfect fit for the loud, arrogant, fuck you, ghetto attitude that he wanted Death Row to have. But when Wah, Darren, and Gotti came out of the meeting, they told me the deal wasn't right, and after less than an hour of negotiation, it was clear that I was not going to join the row. Chapter 38, Niggas done started something. Gotti always told me his passion wasn't with Mike Geronimo, but he couldn't front on how well he worked with Jay-Z. Later that year, even though he was still spending time with me in Powerhouse making tracks, even though he still drove his MPV to the crib every once in a while to say what's up to Tashira and me, Gotti got down with Jay's Rockefeller label and helped Jay put out his first album, Reasonable Doubt. I wasn't mad at him. I just couldn't understand how everybody was doing their thing and I was still living in Mulford. I couldn't understand why I wasn't a dime richer than I was before I did Born Loser. Open for leaders of the new school, Battle K Solo, Lord Finesse, Andre the Giant, Bill Blast. It didn't make sense. Nobody anywhere I went could ever fuck with me on the rap tip. And yet I was the one broke. I was the one without a deal. I didn't give up, but I was so tired of being disappointed, so tired of being turned down and watching other niggas blow up that in 1995, I just decided to do what I did best, hit the streets. Swiss was Wa's nephew. He grew up in the Bronx, but a couple of years after I met Wa, he moved in with his uncle in Mount Vernon. That's when we started hanging together. Swiss was much younger than I was, but he was a good brother to roll with because every night the two of us went out, we would game to get into any dirt we could, whether it was running pockets, knocking delivery men off their bikes, or just leaving everybody broke in a game of dice. Swiss and I were always out on the street looking for that next thrill. One of our favorite pastimes was hopping cabs. See, the key to hopping a cab is to make a few stops before you get to your final destination. Tell the driver where you're going when you first get in. Then along the way, ask him to stop in a store somewhere for a few minutes. Come back, then ask him to stop again a few more blocks up. But by the second or third time you get out of the car, the driver will be comfortable with you getting out. So then the next time, you just don't come back. Or you could take the more direct approach. We're hopping you, homeboy. Just take it easy and go with the flow. You normally save that move for when you needed a cab to join you on a robbery. An unmarked cab could make for a good getaway car, although drivers often got nervous. No, I'm not going to do that, they would yell from behind the wheel. Then you'd have to put a lot of pressure on them and hit them in the back of the head a few times. But you still had to be careful that when you went to make your move, they didn't pull off on you and leave you stranded in the middle of nowhere with the victim up the street. One time though, Swiss and I happened to come across this African dude who was as gangster as we were. Give me $30 and I'll take you anywhere, he said. He heard shit going down, he heard the shots and everything, but he never budged. He just stayed right on that corner as calmly as a professional. The problem was that when it was time for me and Swiss to get out of there, we realized that we had asked him to park behind us on a one-way street. So once we got in his car, we had to drive right past the scene of the crime. That wasn't smart. Thankfully, our game was much tighter the night we went to war. There had been a party at School 12, and as usual, everyone was hanging out in front of the building. After it was over, not trying to go home. I was posted in the front when Tashira told me that she had noticed some guys from her old block eyeing me like they were scheming. She said she heard one of them mumbling about how I had robbed their man or something. Now, YO had been my spot for years already. I was 25 years old and had been robbing cats in the city since I came back from group home in 85. So when Boo Boo put me on to what she thought was going on, I caught an attitude real quick. Y'all niggas ain't gonna creep me. I done raised y'all. Don't try that bullshit. Then I noticed one of the dudes she was talking about staring at me. Come on, man. Don't play me like that. You're a kid. Don't stare me in my face like I'm a bitch. I've seen you and your older brother pull your pants down before, you bitch ass nigga. Then another kid walked by me pulling a tuck and show move with his shirt, flashing a gun that he had in his waistband. Oh, y'all got balls like that? Okay, I'm gonna have to kill one of you motherfuckers tonight. Yo, Swiss, go get that. Morford was right around the corner from School 12, and Swiss made the round trip in less than 5 minutes. It was funny though, because it was summertime, no less than 70 degrees outside. And when he came back wearing this big brown goose feathered vest, if we weren't in this kind of situation, I would have clowned him. What, are you cold? You trying to match with something, dog? But the Colt served its purpose because Swiss had a fully loaded Glock and a baby shotgun hidden underneath it. Now, common street sense should tell you that if you see someone walking down the street as hot as it was with that kind of oversized jacket on, you should probably get the fuck out of the way. especially if you don't really know the person. But those young boys really wanted to get hurt that night because as soon as they saw Swiss, instead of moving away, they stayed there and waited for us to get fully loaded. They really thought they were going to put us down. Don't get your dicks hard now, motherfuckers. Swiss and I just got back to back, guns in hand. What? What? We were outnumbered. And this was also Swiss's first time in a gun battle, so he didn't know much. But even though he didn't do exactly what he was supposed to do, he showed the heart to do whatever he had to do. And that's always the most important thing. No matter how dangerous a situation is, if you have heart, you'll learn the rules to any street game in 2 tries. The first time, you'll struggle. But then the next time, out the gate, a nigga with heart would always say, I got this. Swiss learned fast. I didn't see him amidst the commotion, but my man, a DJ named Cool C, also had my back that night. I had been trying to buy a 9mm from him earlier at the party, and he didn't want to sell it to me. I was glad when he saw what was going down and decided instead to put the gun to use on my behalf. While me and Swiss kept moving forward, he came over my shoulder shooting, and the three of us kept busting at those bitches back to back. After a few rounds, it was over. I will rob and steal with your dog, nigga. What? Ride till we die, on till it's up. Chapter 39, Harlem. Darren and Wah often held court in front of the Mart on 125th Street in Harlem. Sometimes they would pick me up in Yonkers and drive me downtown, but most often I just jumped on the Metro North commuter train to Manhattan and then took the local subway to get off on 25th because besides hopping cabs, I still didn't have any way of getting myself around. Now that I wasn't a juvenile anymore, stealing cars was a less attractive activity because with the record I had, one auto theft conviction would have easily sent me up north for a few years. Once you regularly start coming to a block, you begin to see the social dynamics of that block. Who the hustlers are versus who is trying to do something legit. Who has a valid beef with who and who is on some bullshit. That's important because if you don't know the players in the hood you're rolling in, you are vulnerable to getting caught out there. One day, Wad took me up to 129th Street and introduced me to a producer cat named Grease. Him and his man Big Stan had put together a rap group called NIB, Niggas in Black. They threw a lot of parties in Harlem and ran around the streets battling cats like I did in YO. When I went through his block, him and Big Stan always had the card game going, or they would just be chilling, smoking, and playing music. Often I would join them for a few passes of the blunt, and soon there began to grow a quiet acknowledgement, the three of us, that we probably could become friends. It was just because of the kind of guys we were. We all knew it would take a minute. See, relationships are a delicate thing in the street. You have to be careful of who you got close to, if anybody, because there are many ways a person could betray you when the game is survival. So, for months, me, Grease, and Big Stan were just cool. One summer, Why asked Grease to get down with Rough Riders. No thanks, Grease replied. Not to be turned down, Why let him think about it for a few days and then rolled up on him again. Nah, I'm good. Grease was only a block nigga, but he knew what he wanted. He couldn't deny the money Why and Darren were clocking in the neighborhood on the hustle tip or the plans that they had for Rough Riders. He just didn't want to be tied down to anyone. When Why offered to manage him instead of asking him to sign the more encompassing production agreement that he was talking about before, then Grease agreed. After that, Grease would troop to Powerhouse every day and and bang out his music. We'd leave Harlem late in the afternoon, jean pockets loaded with a bag of weed, and stay in Yonkers until 3 or 4 in the morning. Grease used to rhyme, but after an asthma condition made it difficult for him to flow the way he wanted to, he concentrated on making the music. All those words back to back. I'm not with all that. I'm not trying to pass the fuck out, he used to say. When I heard his beats, I was surprised by how many different styles he had. Some of his tracks were laid back, others were more street, but they all had this grimy, almost eerie quality about them, and they were always very musical. Right away, I could hear that there was more going on in one of Grease's beats than a simple loops and samples that I was used to. We did a lot of songs together those early nights in Powerhouse. Joints called Final Call and Against the Grain were two of the best. Then Y would always give him a ride back to Harlem and he'd sleep and do it again the next day. Whether you were a producer or an MC, soon that day and night routine became the schedule for everyone down with Rough Riders. Pent One, who was now going by the producer named PK, finally gave up his tagging career and followed a similar late evening to early morning routine. Swiss bought himself a pair of mismatched turntables and had started coming to Powerhouse all the time to teach himself how to make beats. And of course, the pups were always there. There wasn't any punishment if you weren't at the studio every night. Your absence just proved that you weren't as hungry as the next man. And at least among the young niggas, competition was the defining element of being in the Rough Riders family. For the first few years that I knew Darren, he concentrated on his hustle game and let his brother handle most of the music business. But since we came back from Baltimore, he has started spending more and more hours in the studio and quickly developed an ear for the music. Whatever kind of beat it was, Darren had a knack for coming up with the perfect chorus, and like Grease, PK, and other producers, always had an instinct for what rappers and what flows best matched what beats. Darren always believed in me, and he also knew that Rough Riders had too much talent in one place not to be able to make something happen. We just had to keep working at it. After a few months, Darren was right. Rough Riders discipline paid off, just not for me.